Night settles over the northern world like a heavy, silent cloak. The sky above is a vast sea of indigo and silver, rippling with the faint shimmer of the aurora borealis. Beneath its ghostly glow, the fjords lie still, their dark waters reflecting fragments of moonlight. The air is sharp with winter's breath, carrying whispers that seem older than time itself. Along the edge of a quiet settlement, torches burn low, their flames bending gently in the wind. A group of warriors gather near a great wooden hall, their cloaks dusted with frost, their eyes fixed upon the glowing embers of a central fire. They speak little, for the night is sacred. This is not a night for noise, but for listening. Somewhere in the silence, the Old Ones speak. Not with words, but with symbols carved into stone and bone. Their language is not spoken aloud, it is drawn into the world, etched into wood, pressed into the skin of shields, whispered into the memory of the earth itself. The Vikings called them runes. Each line, each stroke, carried weight. To carve a rune was to touch something beyond the mortal realm, to shape the unseen currents of fate. A warrior kneels before a smooth piece of birch, his blade glinting faintly in the firelight. His breath fogs the air as he carves a single symbol, careful and reverent. As the blade cuts through the grain, he murmurs a quiet chant, a sound so soft it might be mistaken for the wind. He believes that this simple act will guard his spirit, that the rune he carves tonight will ride with him into battle at dawn. Around him, others do the same, tracing lines that call upon ancient powers, protection, courage, victory, destiny. In these northern lands, every shadow seems alive with mystery. The mountains rise like sleeping giants, their peaks lost in mist. The forests whisper secrets through the pines, secrets that the old gods still hear. For the Vikings, this world was never silent, it was filled with voices, spirits in the trees, omens in the flight of birds, and magic in the marks they carved. The runes were the bridge between what is seen and what lies hidden. To wield them was to step into a conversation with the divine. Long before the clash of swords or the cry of war horns, battles were fought in the quiet, inside the soul, inside the heart. Victory, they believed, began not with strength of arm, but with harmony between man and fate. And so, before blood touched the ground, warriors turned to symbols older than any kingdom, to languages whispered by gods and learned through sacrifice. They asked not for mercy, but for meaning. They sought not to escape destiny, but to know it. Imagine the sound of the sea rolling against the shore, slow and rhythmic, as though echoing the pulse of the earth itself. The smell of pine and smoke, the cold kiss of the wind, the soft creak of leather armor, all these weave together into a living dream. You are there among them, watching as they prepare, feeling the quiet intensity that hums in the air. A shaman stands apart, cloaked in furs, eyes closed, lips moving in silent invocation. Her hands hover over a small pouch filled with carved stones, each etched with a rune, each holding the weight of an ancient truth. She draws one into her palm and studies it by firelight. Her voice, when it comes, is steady and low. The path is chosen. The gods have spoken. No one moves. No one dares to question. For in the Viking heart, destiny is not a stranger, it is a companion. They believe every soul is born beneath the weave of the Norns, three sisters who spin the threads of all existence. To know the runes is to glimpse the pattern. To carve them is to leave one's own mark upon the web of life. Tonight, as the stars burn cold and distant, these warriors do not feel alone. Around them, the presence of the old gods lingers, Odin the Seeker, Freyja the Wise, Thor the Protector. Their names move like embers through the air. In the stillness, the runes glow faintly, as though lit from within, carrying promises into the unseen. There is peace in their faith, a calm acceptance of what is to come. They understand that fate cannot be denied, only embraced. Tomorrow, the clash of iron will echo across the fjords, and many will fall. But tonight, they sit in the company of mystery, their hearts steady, their spirits anchored by ancient words carved into wood and stone. The runes, they believe, will guide them, through life, through death, and beyond. As the fire dwindles to glowing coals, the wind carries the last whisper of their chants into the darkness. Above, the northern lights dance softly across the heavens, painting the sky with shifting rivers of green and gold. The earth breathes, the stars listen, and the symbols sleep, waiting to awaken when the first light of dawn touches them once more. In this world of shadows and silence, where gods speak through symbols and fate is etched in lines of power, the Vikings find their strength, not in the roar of battle, but in the quiet knowing that destiny walks beside them. And so begins our journey, into a realm where magic is written, not spoken, and where every rune holds a story waiting to be told. The world of the Vikings was vast and alive, stretching from the icy fjords of Norway to the green shores of England, from the misted cliffs of Iceland to the silver rivers of Rus. Their ships, long and slender, sliced through the waves like blades of destiny, carrying men whose eyes held both wonder and fire. To outsiders, they were raiders, wild, ruthless, hungry for gold and conquest. Yet beneath the clash of swords and the roar of storms lived another truth, softer and far more profound. The Vikings were dreamers, poets, and seekers. They saw the world not as chaos, but as a great tapestry woven by unseen hands, where every thread, every life, had purpose. When they sailed, it was not only to claim land or riches. They sailed to meet fate. The creak of the oars, the call of the gulls, the rhythm of the sea, all were songs of destiny guiding them onward. For these seafarers, the horizon was not a boundary but a promise. Beyond it lay mystery, and in mystery, meaning. In their villages, carved from wood and stone, the Vikings lived close to the elements. The wind was their messenger, the earth their teacher, the stars their silent guides. They read omens in the flight of ravens and listened for whispers in the crackle of fire. Life was short, fragile, and fierce, and they believed it should be lived with courage and reverence. Every sunrise was a gift from the gods, every storm, a lesson in humility. To understand the Viking soul, one must look beyond the raids and the battles. Their hearts were bound to the ancient myths that sang through the northern lands, stories of gods and giants, of sacrifice and creation, of worlds born from fire and ice. These tales were not mere entertainment. They were truths encoded in poetry, reflections of a cosmos both beautiful and perilous. The Vikings saw themselves as part of this cosmic story, warriors in a divine saga, their lives echoing the struggles of the gods themselves. They believed that the universe was alive with spirit, that fate, what they called Wyrd, flowed through everything. It was neither cruel nor kind, it simply was. One could not escape it, but one could meet it with honor. A man's worth was not measured by how long he lived, but by how bravely he walked his path. Death was not an end, but a doorway, and to die well was to step through that doorway with pride. In the flickering light of half-fires, skalds, the storytellers and poets, sang of heroes whose deeds would echo forever. They told of Sigurd the dragon slayer, of Ragnar and his sons, of mighty Odin who gave his eye for wisdom. The listeners, wrapped in furs and silence, would close their eyes and drift into those ancient worlds, feeling the pulse of legend beat within their own hearts. Through these stories, they learned who they were, children of the North, born beneath the shadow of gods, shaped by frost and fire. But their faith was not blind. The Vikings did not pray for mercy, they forged their strength through acceptance. They knew that the gods themselves were bound by fate, that even Odin, the All-Father, would one day fall in the final battle of Ragnarok. Yet they did not despair. To live, to fight, to love, and to die with honor, this was their creed. It gave them peace amid uncertainty and courage before the unknown. Their connection to the divine was not confined to temples or priests. It lived in the rhythm of daily life, in the carving of runes, in the lighting of torches, in the silence before battle. They built altars not of marble, but of memory and meaning. The gods were not distant, they walked beside them in every storm, every triumph, every loss. The wind in the sails might be Odin's breath, the warmth of the hearth, the gift of Freyja's grace. To modern eyes, their world may seem harsh, filled with endless toil and sudden violence. Yet within that harshness bloomed a rare kind of beauty, a faith that saw divinity in the simplest things. The ripple of water, the crack of thunder, the glow of dawn, each was a message from realms unseen. They believed that life itself was sacred, that every act carried weight in the great balance of the cosmos. Even in war, there was reverence. Before a raid, a leader might stand before his men, hand upon his sword, whispering prayers into the cold air. They believed that courage was a flame gifted by the gods, and to let it burn brightly was to honor them. Victory was a blessing, but defeat, too, could be noble if faced with steadfast heart. To fall in battle was not shame, it was passage to Valhalla, where the brave feasted among heroes. And so, the Vikings lived between two worlds, one of earth and sea, and one of spirit and symbol. Their strength came not only from muscle and steel, but from their unshakable bond with the unseen. They walked in harmony with the rhythm of fate, accepting its ebb and flow like tides upon their shores. In their eyes, every moment was part of a divine pattern, every challenge a chance to prove the soul's mettle. As night descended upon their longhouses, and the fires dimmed to soft embers, families would gather close, the scent of smoke and pine in the air. Children drifted to sleep to the murmur of old tales, their dreams filled with gods and dragons, ships and stars. Outside, the northern wind carried the echo of their songs across the darkened land, a reminder that even in silence, their spirit endured. To see the Vikings as mere conquerors is to miss the essence of who they were. They were seekers of truth, bound by courage, guided by symbols that spoke to the soul. Their blades may have carved kingdoms, but their hearts carved meaning into the mystery of existence. And in that quiet space between the mortal and the divine, they found a peace few could understand, a peace born not from certainty, but from the graceful acceptance of fate's endless weave. In the beginning, before men carved ships or raised stones, before the first sagas were sung, there was silence, vast, endless, and waiting. From that silence rose the great tree Yggdrasil, its roots winding through the 9 worlds, its branches reaching into the heavens. It was said that every life, every star, every whisper of wind was tied to this cosmic tree, its veins pulsing with the essence of fate itself. The gods walked among its boughs, and beneath its shadow, the mysteries of the universe slept. Among the gods, there was one who hungered for knowledge beyond all others, Odin, the All-Father. He was the wanderer cloaked in midnight, the seeker who would trade anything for wisdom. He had tasted the waters of Mimir's well and sacrificed his own eye for sight beyond sight, yet still his soul yearned. For he knew that words held power, and there were words not yet known, symbols that could shape reality, command the unseen, and speak to the fabric of fate. These were the runes, ancient and hidden, sleeping within the roots of Yggdrasil. The tales tell that Odin sought them in solitude, his heart heavy with longing. He climbed to the highest branch of the world tree and gazed into the endless void, knowing that only through sacrifice could he earn the secrets of creation. And so he gave himself to the tree. With his own hand, he drove a spear through his side, the sacred weapon Gungnir, forged in the heart of magic. Then he hung there, 9 days and 9 nights, suspended between life and death, neither god nor ghost, his body swaying in the cold winds of the cosmos. No bread passed his lips, no drink touched his tongue. The stars turned above him, the worlds shifted below, but still he endured. The pain was vast, the silence endless, yet within that silence came whispers, shapes forming in the void, lines and angles glowing faintly in the darkness. They were symbols older than speech, older than the gods themselves, pulsing with raw power. And in the final moment, when his strength was nearly gone, a great vision pierced his mind. The runes revealed themselves, singing softly, calling to his soul. In that instant, Odin understood. He reached out with trembling hands, and the runes came to him, gifting him their secrets. He fell from the tree, reborn, eyes blazing with newfound knowledge. The runes were not mere letters, they were living forces, each one a fragment of the world's design. To know them was to command destiny, to weave the unseen threads of magic that bound gods and men alike. Odin returned from his ordeal with the language of the cosmos engraved upon his spirit, a gift won by blood and silence. From that moment, the runes became more than symbols. They were breath and bone, will and whisper. Each carried meaning not just in word, but in energy. To carve them was to awaken their essence. Fehu for wealth and creation, Uruz for strength and primal force, Thurisaz for chaos and protection, Answers for divine inspiration. Each rune a key, each stroke a spell. Together they formed a sacred alphabet, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. The gods taught these symbols to the chosen among men, those who listen not only with ears but with hearts attuned to the rhythm of the earth. The first carvers learned to draw them on stone and wood, to whisper their names into the wind. They discovered that to write was to summon, that the act of inscription carried the weight of intention. A rune carved in anger might bring ruin, one carved in peace could bring healing. Thus began the sacred art of runecraft. In the quiet halls of the north, men and women studied their forms, tracing each line with reverence. They knew that the runes were not to be spoken lightly, for each sound echoed through the unseen realms. A rune's shape held memory, its sound carried power. Together they formed spells, chants known as Galdr, songs of shaping and summoning. To sing a rune was to awaken it, to call its spirit into the world. As centuries passed, the runes spread across the northern lands, etched into swords, woven into amulets, carved into the timbers of ships bound for distant shores. Warriors bore them into battle, trusting in their strength. Healers inscribed them upon the sick, invoking the gods for mercy. Seers cast them upon cloth, reading their patterns as messages from the future. The runes became companions to life and death alike, guides, guardians, and voices of the divine. Yet their origin was never forgotten. Each time a rune was carved, the tale of Odin's sacrifice echoed in the silence. For in their hearts, the Vikings knew that knowledge demanded a price. To understand the runes was to walk the path of the seeker, to face the unknown with courage and surrender. They believed that within every symbol lay a lesson, a mirror reflecting the soul's journey. In the flicker of torchlight, a carver would pause before striking the blade against wood, whispering a quiet prayer, that his intent be pure, that his spirit align with the power he called forth. The scent of fresh shavings filled the air, mingling with the faint rhythm of chanting. Slowly, carefully, the rune would emerge, simple, graceful, timeless. A line, a curve, a cross, yet within those strokes lay the heartbeat of eternity. To the unknowing eye, they were marks upon a surface. But to the faithful, they were alive, sparks of the cosmic fire, whispers from the roots of Yggdrasil. Each rune was a mystery and a promise, holding both creation and destruction within its form. Together they spoke of a universe where nothing was random, where every event, every breath, every destiny was written in the secret language of the gods. And so, when the Vikings looked upon their world, the roaring sea, the shifting stars, the silent snow, they saw not emptiness, but meaning. The runes taught them that the divine was everywhere, hidden in patterns and signs. To walk through life was to walk through a forest of symbols, each one waiting to be understood. In times of doubt, they turned to the runes for guidance. In moments of triumph, they carved them in gratitude. And in the face of death, they trusted them to open the gates of the next world. Even now, across the ages, their shapes endure, etched in stone, traced in memory, whispered in dreams. They remain as they were in the beginning, silent, powerful, eternal. A gift from a god who gave himself to the void, so that humankind might glimpse the architecture of fate. Close your eyes and imagine the sound of wind through ancient branches, the pulse of the earth beneath your feet. Picture the shadow of a solitary figure hanging upon the tree, the faint glow of symbols spiraling through the darkness. These are the runes, born from silence, carried by sacrifice, and forever whispering to those who seek their wisdom. In the northern lands, where winter's breath lingered across the fjords and the forests whispered with the voices of unseen spirits, the Vikings lived among symbols. The runes were not distant relics of gods, they were companions in every breath of daily life. To them, these markings were more than tools of language, they were vessels of power, the very shapes of destiny drawn into the world by mortal hands. Each day began and ended with their presence, etched into the beams of longhouses, carved into the halves of tools, traced upon the wood of ships that carried them across endless seas. Imagine a craftsman at dawn, the air crisp and pale with frost. He kneels beside a length of oak, his breath curling into mist, a small flame flickering beside him. With care, he draws his blade across the surface, carving slow, deliberate lines. Each stroke is a whisper, each cut a promise. He is not merely shaping wood, he is calling upon ancient powers to dwell within it. Perhaps he carves Algiz, the rune of protection, to bless his home and shield his kin from harm. As the final mark is made, he closes his eyes and murmurs the rune's name, letting its sound resonate in the quiet morning air. The carving glows faintly in the firelight, as though listening. Runes found their place in the heart of every craft. Farmers inscribed them upon plows, trusting that the earth would yield its bounty. Sailors traced them on the masts of their ships, believing they would calm the storms and guide them safely to distant shores. Mothers wove runic symbols into cloth, sewing silent prayers into the garments of their children. Warriors carved them into the iron of their blades, not for ornament, but for strength, to call upon courage when fear whispered too loudly. Every mark was an act of faith, a bridge between the seen and the unseen. The act of carving itself was sacred. The Vikings believed that to carve a rune was to awaken it, to draw forth its essence from the world's hidden layers. The process began with intention, pure and focused. A man or woman would quiet their mind, centering their thoughts upon the purpose of the mark. Only when their spirit aligned with their will would they begin the carving, each motion guided by reverence. It was not a task to be rushed, for haste could twist the meaning, and an impure heart could stir misfortune. The wood or stone became a canvas of destiny, and the carver a vessel through which the divine spoke. Even the materials were chosen with care. Oak for strength, ash for wisdom, stone for permanence. The Vikings believed that each held its own voice, its own harmony with the runes. When the carving was complete, the rune would often be stained with red pigment, sometimes from ochre, sometimes from the blood of the carver himself, binding spirit to symbol, life to meaning. It was said that blood carried intention, and to anoint a rune was to feed it breath. In their homes, runes watched silently from walls and door frames, woven into the rhythm of daily existence. They guarded thresholds against spirits, drew fortune into the hearth, and carried prayers into the air like drifting smoke. Travelers carried talismans etched with runes for guidance and safety, small tokens tied around the neck or hidden in pouches of leather. These amulets were not mere ornaments, they were companions of the soul, whispering courage on lonely roads, warding off the cold gaze of ill fate. But the runes were not only carved upon objects, they were carved into memory, spoken through chants and songs. The Vikings believed that sound itself held power, that the voice could stir the slumbering energies within each symbol. A rune might be sung into existence, its name carried upon the breath like a spell. In the hush of twilight, one might hear a soft melody rise from the halls, a song of protection or blessing, woven from syllables older than time. These chants, called gulder, were both prayer and poetry, shaping the air with meaning. Children learned their first runes as others might learn their first words. They traced the shapes in sand and snow, whispered their names into the wind. They grew up knowing that every mark carried a story, every symbol a soul. To write was to act with intention, to speak was to awaken. Thus, language became sacred, and silence too held weight, for it was within silence that the runes first revealed themselves to Odin. When illness struck or misfortune loomed, the wise turned again to these sacred forms. Seers and healers would carve runes upon smooth stones, lay them in patterns, and read their messages as one might read the stars. Each arrangement spoke a truth, offering glimpses into paths yet to unfold. A single rune might counsel patience, another warn of danger, another bless with hope. These readings were not commands but reflections, mirrors of fate guiding those who listened closely. In times of joy, too, the runes were near. They marked the joining of lovers, etched upon wedding gifts and carved into thresholds where new families would dwell. They blessed newborns, tracing symbols upon their cradles, binding their first breaths to fortune. In moments of sorrow, they stood beside the living and the dead alike, inscribed upon stones raised to honor the fallen, singing their names into eternity. A runestone was more than a monument, it was a message to the gods, a promise that memory would endure. Through all these moments, the runes wove through life like unseen threads. To the Vikings, there was no boundary between the sacred and the mundane. The divine lived in every gesture, every tool, every whisper of wind. When they carved, they conversed with creation itself. Each symbol held a heartbeat, and in its rhythm, they found meaning. Close your eyes and imagine their world, the smell of pine and smoke, the feel of rough wood beneath steady hands, the soft murmur of voices in the firelight. Each stroke of the blade, each whispered syllable, draws power from the depths of the cosmos. The runes are not silent, they hum with life, their echoes stretching across centuries, reaching even now into the hearts of those who seek their wisdom. For the Vikings, to carve a rune was to shape fate, to speak with the gods, to leave one's mark upon the eternal fabric of existence. And so they carved, on ships that sailed beyond the horizon, on stones that still stand beneath northern skies, and within their very souls, where the language of destiny whispered its quiet truths. Before the dawn, the world holds its breath. The sky is a deep, endless gray, the kind that whispers of snow and silence. Across the frost-covered plain, the warriors gather, shadows against the dim light, their cloaks heavy with dew, their breath rising in quiet clouds. The stillness before battle is sacred. It is here, in this suspended moment between life and death, that the Vikings turn to the old magic. For they believe that before the clash of swords, before the cry of war, the unseen must be summoned and the spirit prepared. Steel alone does not win battles. It is the harmony between courage and fate, guided by the runes, that determines who will stand and who will fall. Each man kneels before his weapon. The edge of his blade gleams faintly, kissed by the pale light of morning. With steady hands, he carves upon it a mark, a rune drawn with reverence, its lines precise, its meaning clear. Tiwaz for victory, Algiz for protection, Tiwaz for endurance. As the blade cuts into the metal, sparks dance like stars, and with each stroke, the warrior breathes a whisper, a chant known only to him. He is not alone. Around him, others murmur softly, their voices blending into a low rhythm that hums through the air, a song of invocation to the unseen. A leader stands among them, his gaze fixed upon the horizon. His armor bears the marks of past battles, and across his chest hangs an amulet inscribed with runes of power. He raises his hand, and the chanting fades into silence. In that stillness, he draws a small pouch from his belt. Inside, polished stones engraved with sacred symbols, each one a message from the gods. He casts them upon the earth, watching as they fall, their patterns speaking in a language older than speech. The seer beside him leans close, her eyes reflecting the flicker of the torches. She studies the runes, tracing their forms with weathered fingers, reading the whispers of destiny written upon the ground. The wind stirs. A raven cries overhead, its dark wings slicing through the dawn. The omen is clear, Odin watches. The All-Father, who hung from the world tree and bled for the gift of runes, walks beside them now. The seer's voice rises, soft yet strong, carrying through the ranks. She speaks of courage, of the thread of each man's fate woven into the great tapestry. She reminds them that death is not an end but a crossing, that those who fall with honor will feast in Valhalla. Her words sink into their hearts, steadying the tremor of fear that hides beneath resolve. Now they prepare the charms of war. Shields are lifted, their wooden faces painted with runes of strength and defiance. Spears are wrapped in strips of cloth bearing symbols of victory. Helmets carry small etchings hidden beneath the rim, invisible to the eye but alive with power. Some warriors press runes against their skin, marking their forearms and chests with lines of protection, the sharp sting of the blade a sacred offering. They believe the symbols will turn aside harm, confuse the enemy, blind the eyes of those who seek to strike them down. In the moments before the march, a great hush falls. The leader draws his sword, its runes glimmering like faint starlight, and lifts it high. The army responds with a deep chant, a rhythm that rolls through the cold air like thunder. It is not a shout of rage but of unity, a call to the gods to witness their courage. The earth seems to tremble with their voices. They march forward, their steps measured, their hearts bound together by faith and fury. When the battle begins, the world erupts. Steel meets steel, cries ring across the plain, and the air fills with the bitter scent of iron and smoke. Amid the chaos, the runes whisper. They guide the swing of the sword, the flight of the spear, the beat of the warrior's heart. Some say that in the heat of battle, they see the faint glow of symbols burning upon their weapons, as though the gods themselves have come to fight beside them. Others speak of foes struck down as though by unseen hands, or blades turned aside as if the air had solidified into armor. The berserkers are among them, men who have surrendered their minds to the storm within, their bodies transformed by ritual and rune. They painted their skin with sacred marks, drank potions brewed in secrecy, and chanted the ancient words until the world dissolved into fire and fury. When the rage takes them, they move like spirits, fearless and unyielding, their eyes alight with something not entirely human. The others follow them, emboldened by their madness, believing that the gods have entered their flesh. Yet the runes do not promise victory to all. Some are marked by destiny to fall, and even this is sacred. To die with courage is to complete one's thread in the great weave. As the wounded sink to the ground, they clutch the amulets around their necks, feeling the engraved symbols against their skin. They whisper final words to Odin and to the runes carved into their blades. They know their spirits will be carried beyond the veil, guided by the same symbols that once led them through life. When the battle ends, and silence returns, the survivors walk among the fallen. They gather the weapons and touch the runes upon them, giving thanks to the gods for their strength. Fires are lit, and offerings made, bread, mead, and blood spilled upon the earth. The seer returns, kneeling among the ashes, casting her runes once more. She reads the signs of the day's outcome, the balance of honor and loss, and whispers prayers for the souls who now feast in the halls of the dead. The runes, though silent, have spoken. They were there in every heartbeat, every breath, every strike. They shaped the course of the battle as surely as any sword. For the Vikings, war was never only of flesh, it was a meeting of worlds, where the mortal and divine intertwined in a single dance. Victory and death, triumph and tragedy, all flowed from the same well, the same hidden order that the runes revealed. As night falls, the warriors return to their camp. They sit beside the fires, weary but alive, their armor stained, their spirits heavy with memory. They gaze into the flames, tracing with their eyes the shapes of the symbols carved upon their weapons and charms. The flickering light makes the runes shimmer like stars, and for a moment, they feel the presence of the gods once more. The chants rise again, low, rhythmic, filled with gratitude. They sing to Odin, to Tiwaz, to Freyja, to the unseen powers who walked beside them. The runes glow softly in the firelight, their lines alive with ancient truth. They remind the warriors that every battle is but a single thread in the endless tapestry, and that the same fate that leads them to war will one day lead them home. In the hush that follows, the night embraces them. Above, the stars watch in silence, and in the cold wind, the faintest echo of the runes can still be heard, whispering of courage, of destiny, and of the eternal bond between man and the unseen. In the quiet world of the Vikings, where every whisper of wind carried meaning and every flicker of flame told a story, there existed a sacred alphabet, a set of symbols that were more than marks upon wood or stone. They were living echoes of divine truth, each one a doorway into unseen realms. The Vikings called them runes, and to them, these symbols were not mere letters. They were fragments of creation itself, the bones of the cosmos, the patterns upon which destiny was woven. To speak their names was to stir ancient powers, to carve them was to shape the world with one's own hand. Each rune carried its own essence, its own pulse of energy. The wise among the Norse knew their shapes by heart and their meanings by soul. When they looked upon a single symbol, they did not see lines, they saw a story, a force, a whisper from the gods. Let the night grow still and the mind grow quiet, and listen to the voices of the runes as they reveal their secrets. Fehu, the first, the rune of wealth and vitality. Its shape mirrors the horns of cattle, the old measure of fortune. But Fehu's meaning goes deeper than gold or livestock. It speaks of movement, of energy that flows and nourishes. It is the spark of creation, the fire that must be shared lest it grow stagnant. To carve Fehu was to invite abundance, but also to remember that true wealth is not kept, it circulates, feeding the spirit as well as the hand. Warriors would inscribe Fehu upon their weapons to ensure strength and prosperity in conquest. Farmers drew it upon their tools to bless the harvest. It was the breath of life in motion. Uruz follows, the rune of primal strength, shaped like the mighty aurochs that once roamed the northern plains. It hums with raw, untamed power, the energy of the earth before it was tamed by men. Those who bore Uruz upon their skin or weapons sought endurance, courage, and transformation. It taught that strength was not only of the body but of will, the ability to rise again after the storm, to stand unbroken when the world trembles. In the stillness of meditation, the sound of its name vibrated like a heartbeat, reminding the listener that they, too, carried the wild power of creation within their veins. Fury says, sharp and fierce, the rune of the thorn, the giant, the sudden strike of chaos. It was both weapon and warning. Thurisaz guarded the threshold between order and disorder. Those who carved it did so with caution, for its power could defend or destroy. It called upon the might of Thor, protector of Midgard, whose hammer crushed the forces of chaos. Yet it also carried the wildness of the frost giants, those who challenged the gods themselves. To work with Thurisaz was to walk a razor's edge, invoking fierce protection but also awakening forces beyond control. Then came Ansuz, the breath of the divine. Its shape rises like a staff, channeling the wind of inspiration. This rune belongs to Odin, the god of wisdom and speech, who gave his eye for knowledge and hung upon the world tree for truth. Ansuz is the whisper of the gods in the ear of the poet, the clarity of thought in the midst of battle, the spark of insight in the seeker's heart. When a skald sang verses beneath the stars, when a seer spoke in trance, when a leader uttered words that stirred courage, Ansuz was there, flowing through their tongues like sacred flame. To carve it was to open oneself to divine communication, to become a vessel for wisdom beyond mortal grasp. Rado, the rune of the road, the journey, the rhythm of movement. Its lines curve like a wheel, forever turning. It speaks of travel not only across lands but through the soul's pathways, of cycles that bring growth and return. Those who carved Rado upon their ships sought safe passage, those who carried it upon their bodies sought harmony in life's unfolding path. It taught that every journey has purpose, that even wandering leads to wisdom. Its sound echoed like the steady beat of hooves, a reminder that destiny is a road walked step by step, each footfall guided by unseen hands. Kinaz burns next, the torch that lights the darkness. Its flame reveals truth hidden in shadow. It is knowledge, creativity, the spark that ignites understanding. To bear Kinaz was to carry clarity, to see through illusion, to craft with inspiration. Blacksmiths etched it into their forges, poets whispered its name before composing verse. It reminds the soul that every dark place holds a hidden light, waiting to be kindled. Gibbo, the gift, the sacred exchange. Two lines crossing in perfect balance. It represents harmony, generosity, and the bond between giver and receiver. In carving Gibbo, the Vikings honored the law of reciprocity that governed both gods and men. They knew that every offering would be answered, every promise bound by fate. It was carved upon wedding stones, upon alliances forged, and upon altars where offerings were laid. Gibbo teaches that life itself is a gift, and to give freely is to live in alignment with the divine order. Wonjo, joy, the rune of harmony and fulfillment. Its shape is simple, yet it carries the warmth of firelight after the storm, the laughter of kin reunited, the deep peace of a heart at rest. Wonjo is the song of gratitude, the sigh of contentment when all is as it should be. To invoke it was to call happiness into the home, to remind the weary that even amidst hardship, joy still waits beyond the horizon. Others followed, each with their own melody. Hagalaz, the hailstone, the sudden storm that clears the sky. Northes, the rune of need, teaching patience and endurance. Isa, the stillness of ice, where reflection brings clarity. Jera, the harvest, reward for effort and the turning of the seasons. Tiwaz, the yew tree, symbol of resilience and transformation. Perthro, the cup of mystery, the unseen forces of chance and fate. Algiz, the elk, the guardian, protector of sacred space. Sowilo, the sun, source of vitality and guidance. Each rune a voice in the choir of the cosmos, each one a note in the great song of creation. When a Viking carved these symbols, it was not done thoughtlessly. Each stroke was a prayer, each whisper a promise. They sat in silence, feeling the weight of their intention, listening for the echo of the rune spirit. To invoke Algiz was to feel the antlers of protection rise around them. To trace Sowilo was to feel the warmth of sunlight upon their soul. The act was not mere craft, it was communion. At night, by the fire, they would gaze upon the runes carved into their belongings, the gleam of Tiwaz upon a blade, the gentle curve of Wonjo on a cup, the firm lines of Iwaz upon a doorframe. Each one spoke in its own way, whispering guidance, offering strength. The runes did not shout, they murmured softly to those who listened, revealing truths layer by layer, like the unfolding of dawn across a silent fjord. In this sacred language, the Vikings found more than magic, they found meaning. The runes reminded them that every act carried intention, Every moment held power. Through them, they touched the divine, weaving their mortal lives into the eternal pattern. And even now, across centuries, their symbols endure, etched in stone, carried in memory, glowing still in the dreams of those who seek their ancient wisdom. The storm gathered over the northern hills, a dark veil rippling across the grey sky. In the valley below, a small village lay silent, its wooden halls glimmering faintly with the glow of dying embers. The scent of rain hung heavy in the air, mingled with pine and earth. At the edge of the settlement, where the land met the shadowed forest, a lone warrior stood beside a small hut draped in runic charms and wind chimes carved from bone. His breath was slow, his eyes deep with thought. Tomorrow, he would ride to war. Tonight, he had come to seek the wisdom of the seers. He pushed aside the woven curtain and stepped into the dim interior. The air was warm and thick with the scent of herbs and smoke. Candles flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed alive with whispers. At the center of the room sat an old woman, her hair silver as frost, her eyes pale as moonlight. She looked up as he entered, and though her face bore the lines of many winters, her gaze was sharp, cutting through silence like a blade. "You have come seeking truth," she said softly, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. The warrior bowed his head. "Yes, wise one. The battle awaits at dawn. I wish to know what the gods have written for me." She nodded, motioning him closer. "Sit, son of the north. The runes will speak if your heart is ready to hear them." He knelt before her as she reached for a small pouch of leather. From it, she drew polished stones etched with ancient symbols, each one worn smooth by years of touch and prayer. She held them in her hands, eyes closed, lips murmuring words in the old tongue, a song that rose and fell like the tide, a language older than memory. Then, with a breath as deep as the sea, she cast the runes across a cloth spread before them. They clattered softly, settling into place with quiet purpose. The candlelight glimmered across their surfaces, revealing their forms: Tiwaz, Algiz, Hagalaz, Isa, Perthro. The seers studied them in silence, tracing their lines with her thin fingers, feeling their weight, their voice. At last, she spoke. "The path before you is written in fire and frost," she whispered. "You will stand in the heart of battle, and the gods will watch. Tiwaz marks you with courage. You will fight bravely, and your name will not be forgotten. But Hagalaz brings the storm, destruction, sudden and merciless. You cannot turn from it. Isa speaks of stillness, of the cold hand of fate that halts even the strongest heart." The warrior's eyes did not waver. "And Perthro?" he asked, his voice steady. She looked into his eyes, her own shimmering with sorrow and knowing. "Perthro is the cup of mystery, the rune of what is hidden. It tells me that your destiny lies beyond your sight. You may find victory, or you may find the end that leads to new beginnings. The gods have cast the bones. The weave is set." For a long time, he was silent. The crackle of the fire filled the room, the sound of distant thunder rolling across the sky. At last, he spoke. "If death waits for me, then I will meet it with honor." The seeress leaned forward, placing her hand over his. "Death is not the end, warrior. The soul is eternal. The runes tell not of despair, but of transformation. Should you fall, the halls of Valhalla will open, and Odin himself will greet you. You will feast among heroes, and your spirit will rise with the dawn." He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. The fear that had lingered in his chest began to fade, replaced by a quiet resolve. When he opened them again, his gaze was calm, his heart steady. The seeress gathered the runes and returned them to their pouch. Then she reached into a wooden box beside her and drew out a thin piece of birchwood. With a small blade, she began to carve, her hands moving with practiced grace. Lines took shape, sharp, deliberate, alive with purpose. When she finished, she held it out to him. Upon it gleamed the runes Algiz and Tiwaz, protection and endurance, the guardians of the soul. "Carry this into battle," she said. "When the storm rages and the world trembles, hold fast to these symbols. They will guide you, shield you, remind you that you are never alone." He took the charm in his hand, feeling the grooves beneath his fingers. It pulsed faintly, as though breathing with his heartbeat. He bowed deeply. "I thank you, wise one." As he rose to leave, she called out softly, "Remember, son of the North, the gods do not promise safety. They promise meaning. Walk your path with courage, and even death will bow before you." He stepped out into the night. The sky had grown dark, heavy clouds swirling above, the first drops of rain falling upon his face. The village lay silent, sleeping beneath the whispering storm. In the distance, the faint glow of the horizon marked the place where battle would come. He held the birch charm close, the runes warm against his skin, and whispered their names into the wind. All night, he sat beside the fire, sharpening his blade, tracing the symbols upon it. He thought of his family, of the land he swore to protect, of the songs that would carry his name. The seers's words echoed in his mind, not as warning, but as a promise. Whatever awaited him, it was written in the stars, woven into the tapestry of fate. When dawn came, pale and cold, the warriors gathered. The air was thick with mist, the ground glistening with dew. They stood in silence, their faces solemn, their eyes bright with purpose. The leader raised his sword to the sky and spoke a prayer to Odin, to Tiwaz, to Freyja. The warrior joined in, his voice steady, the charm pressed against his heart. The drums began to beat, slow and deep, echoing like the pulse of the earth. They marched toward the horizon, toward the roar of battle waiting beyond the hills. The storm broke above them, rain mingling with the clang of steel, thunder answering the cries of war. In the heart of the chaos, the warrior fought with the strength of 10 men. His blade sang through the air, guided by the runes carved upon it. He felt no fear, only clarity, as if invisible hands guided each motion. The symbols upon his charm glowed faintly, threads of light weaving through the storm. And though fate's hand would find him before the sun set, his spirit did not falter. In his final breath, he felt the presence of the gods around him, heard the faint whisper of the seers's voice carried by the wind, "You are not lost. You are becoming." When his eyes closed, the storm eased. The clouds parted, revealing a sliver of golden light breaking through the darkness. Somewhere beyond the veil, the halls of Valhalla opened wide, and a new song began, one of courage, destiny, and eternal honor. The seers, far away in her hut, looked up from her fire as the rain ceased. She smiled faintly, whispering a prayer for the soul now risen. The runes had spoken true. The warrior's thread was complete, woven into the endless fabric of eternity. In the vast tapestry of the Norse cosmos, where every star was a spark from the fires of creation and every gust of wind carried the breath of ancient beings, the gods themselves were bound to the power of the runes. For these symbols were not the inventions of mortals, nor even the exclusive treasures of the divine. They were older still, woven into the fabric of existence before the first dawn rose upon the worlds. The gods did not create the runes, they discovered them, listened to them, learned their whispers in the stillness between moments. Through them, the immortals touched the essence of fate itself, shaping reality with sacred intent. Among all the gods, Odin, the All-Father, was the greatest seeker of their wisdom. He was the wanderer cloaked in shadow, the one-eyed god who traded his sight for knowledge of the unseen. His hunger for truth knew no bounds. He had hung upon Yggdrasil, the world tree, pierced by his own spear, suspended between life and death, until the runes revealed themselves to him, glowing, singing, alive. When he fell from the tree, reborn, the language of creation burned within his soul. With the runes, he could heal and harm, bless and curse, summon winds and still them, awaken the dead, and see through the veil of time. Yet even for Odin, the runes were not tools to command, they were mysteries to honor, to wield only with wisdom and reverence. In his hall of Velasjaf, where the silver roof shone like the stars, Odin would sit upon his high throne and gaze across the 9 worlds. In his hands, he would hold the runes carved upon bone and wood, whispering their names into the silence. They answered him not in words, but in the deep, quiet knowing that stirred the threads of destiny. For though he was a god, Odin was still subject to the laws of fate, as were all who lived. The runes reminded him of this truth, that knowledge is power, but power is bound by purpose. Freyja, goddess of love, magic, and seer, also walked the path of runic wisdom. She was the mistress of transformation, the weaver of desire and death, the one who guided souls to their next journey. The runes sang sweetly in her hands, bending to her will with gentleness and grace. Through them, she cast spells of protection and passion, calling forth beauty from sorrow and strength from loss. Her magic was not born of force, but of harmony. She listened to the hidden voices of the world, to the sighs of the wind and the murmurs of the stars. The runes spoke to her in symbols and visions, revealing secrets of the heart and the unseen roads of the spirit. It was said that Freyja taught the art of seer to Odin himself, showing him how to weave destiny like thread upon a loom. Together, their knowledge bridged the realms of gods and mortals, light and shadow, life and death. The runes, resting in their hands, became instruments of balance, shaping the flow of events with care and purpose. They knew that every spell cast, every symbol carved, rippled through the worlds like a pebble dropped into still water. Thor, the thunderer, son of the earth and protector of mankind, carried the runes not as delicate instruments of magic, but as fierce allies in battle. His hammer, Mjolnir, bore inscriptions of power, etched deep into its metal heart. These symbols hummed with the might of storms and the strength of mountains. When Thor hurled his hammer across the skies, the runes blazed with light, guiding its flight, ensuring its return. Through them, he channeled the raw forces of nature, thunder, lightning, the crash of the sea. To Thor, the runes were not gentle whispers but roaring songs, ancient hymns of strength that answered his call in the heat of war. Yet even the trickster Loki, child of fire and chaos, knew the runes, though he used them with cunning and danger. He understood their dual nature, the power to create and destroy, to heal and deceive. Where Odin sought wisdom and Freyja harmony, Loki sought opportunity, bending the symbols to his will, twisting their meanings in pursuit of mischief and transformation. Through him, the runes revealed another truth, that all power carries shadow, and every gift bears a cost. Yet even in his chaos, Loki played his part in the balance of fate, reminding gods and mortals alike that creation and destruction are but two faces of the same mystery. The runes bound the gods together, just as they bound the worlds. They were present in every act of divine will. When Odin sent his ravens, Hugin and Munin, across the skies, their wings carried the whispers of answers, the rune of speech and spirit. When Freyja guided the dead through the mist, she traced Tiwaz, the rune of the yew tree, upon their souls, a promise of endurance beyond death. When Thor raised his hammer to the heavens, so Wilo, the sun's rune, blazed within the storm, a beacon of light against the darkness. Even the Norns, the three sisters who dwelled at the roots of Yggdrasil, carved the runes upon the trunk of the world tree itself. Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, past, present, and future, wove the fates of gods and men alike with runic strokes that shimmered like stars. It was said that their carvings shaped the flow of time, inscribing the paths that all must walk. Not even Odin could unwrite what the Norns had marked. For the Vikings, these tales were not distant myths. They were reflections of truth, a reminder that even the gods bowed before the same mysteries that governed all existence. The runes were the language of those mysteries, the script in which the story of the cosmos was written. To carve them was to touch the divine, to speak them was to breathe with the voice of creation. At night, when the skies shimmered with the aurora's glow, the Vikings would gaze upward and imagine the gods tracing runes across the heavens, weaving the light into messages unseen. The flickering bands of color were said to be the reflections of divine words, blessings cast from above. In those moments, the veil between worlds grew thin, and mortals could feel the pulse of the runes beating in their own hearts. Through the gods, the runes lived. Through the runes, the gods spoke. Together, they formed a circle unbroken, a bond of knowledge, power, and destiny. The symbols reminded all who sought their wisdom, mortal or divine, that life itself is a rune, carved upon the infinite tree of being, glowing softly in the silence of eternity. In the quiet places of the north, where the wind hums softly through the pines and the stars spill silver light upon the earth, there existed a magic older than kings, older than battle, older even than the sagas whispered by firelight. It was the magic of the soul, a bridge between the worlds, a song that could stir the unseen and awaken the silent. The Vikings called it seer, the art of weaving fate, and Gulda, the singing of runes, the voice of creation itself. Together they formed the heartbeat of Norse spirituality, the deep rhythm that bound gods and mortals, life and death, dream and waking. Those who walked the path of seer were known as seers, spirit workers, and fate weavers. They were the ones who could close their eyes and see beyond the veil, whose breath carried whispers from other realms. They were women and men who understood that the world was more than what eyes could see, that every shadow held meaning, every silence a voice. In the stillness of night, they entered trance, stepping softly into the spaces between worlds, where the threads of destiny shimmered like starlight. To begin the practice, the seer would prepare a sacred space, perhaps a quiet clearing in the forest, or a high cliff overlooking the sea, or a dim hall where the only light came from flickering torches. They would cleanse the ground with herbs, sprinkle water drawn from sacred springs, and mark the air with symbols of protection. Around them, runes would be carved into the earth or etched upon stones, forming a circle of power. Within this circle, the veil grew thin, and the song of the cosmos could be heard. Then the seer would call upon the gods, upon Freyja, mistress of Seer, who first brought the art to Asgard, upon Odin, the wanderer, who learned its secrets in his endless quest for wisdom, upon the spirits of the land and the ancestors who watched from beyond. The invocation was not a command, but a plea, a humble offering of intention and heart. The seer would chant softly, their voice rising and falling with the breath of the wind, the syllables carrying the pulse of the runes. This chanting was the beginning of Gulda, the magic of song. In Gulda, the voice became the tool of transformation. Each rune held a sound, and each sound carried power. To sing a rune was to awaken its essence, to call its spirit into the world. The seer's voice would move in rhythm, slow and steady, echoing through the air like waves upon a shore. Sometimes the chant was soft, a murmur barely above a whisper. Other times it rose like thunder, filling the night with sacred resonance. The sound would vibrate through the bones, through the earth, through the unseen realms, weaving a path for the spirit to travel. As the chant deepened, the seer's mind would shift. The body remained, seated or standing within the circle, but the soul drifted, carried upon the current of song. The world of form faded, replaced by visions, the roots of Yggdrasil stretching into endless darkness, rivers of light flowing through the void, spirits moving like mist upon the wind. In this state, the seer could ask questions, seek guidance, glimpse the turning of fate. They might see the face of a god, hear the whisper of a departed ancestor, or witness symbols glowing with meaning, the signs that shaped destiny's path. Those who practiced seer did not seek to control fate, but to understand it, to weave their lives in harmony with its flow. They knew that all things were bound together, the breath of the wind, the cry of the raven, the beating of the heart. By touching the threads, they could heal the wounded, bless the weary, guide the lost. Some were called to foresee the future, reading the patterns of what was to come, others to send their spirit across distance, seeing places and people far beyond the horizon. In moments of war, seers might chant to confuse the enemy or strengthen the courage of their kin. In times of peace, they whispered songs to bless the fields, to call rain, to bring light into the long winter nights. The practice demanded devotion. The seer's life was one of solitude and listening, of humility before the great mysteries. Many were revered for their gifts, yet also feared, for their eyes saw truths others wished to hide. Some dwelled at the edges of villages, visited only when wisdom was needed. Others traveled from hall to hall, bearing their staff and drum, called upon to read omens or speak with the dead. Their presence carried an aura of otherworldliness, the quiet weight of those who walk between realms. Men, too, could walk this path, though it was often seen as the craft of women, for it required surrender, intuition, and deep listening. Odin himself defied the boundaries of pride and took up the practice, learning from Freyja the secret songs that could bend the will of the unseen. In doing so, he showed that true power lies not in domination, but in understanding. Through seer, he glimpsed the vast web of Wia, the destiny that even gods could not escape. At the heart of these practices was the belief that sound and intention shaped reality. The Vikings understood the universe as a living song, a harmony of forces forever in motion. When the seer sang, their voice joined that cosmic melody, guiding its rhythm, tuning its tone. Every chant, every breath, was a prayer, an offering of self to the symphony of existence. In that surrender, miracles unfolded. Wounds closed. Storms quieted. Lost souls found their way home. In the long winter nights, when snow blanketed the land and silence stretched for miles, villagers would gather around the seer's fire. The drums would begin, slow and steady, echoing the heartbeat of the world. The chant would rise, weaving through the smoke, filling the hall with warmth and wonder. Eyes would close, and dreams would come, visions of ancestors smiling in the glow, of green fields yet to bloom, of paths that led beyond the stars. The people would sleep beneath the song, their spirits soothed by the rhythm of the runes. And when dawn returned, painting the sky with pale gold, the seer would sit in quiet contemplation, the last echoes of the chant fading into stillness. For in the stillness, too, there was magic. The silence after song was the breath of the divine, the pause where all things began anew. Through seer and Galder, the Vikings touched the eternal. They learned that the veil between worlds was thin, and that with faith and voice, one could cross it. They understood that the soul is not bound by flesh, that intention is the thread that ties all beings together. In their chants, they spoke with gods. In their silence, they listened to the voice of creation itself. And so the old songs endure, carried by wind and memory, echoing through time. If you listen closely, in the hush of night, in the sigh of the trees, in the rhythm of your own heartbeat, you may still hear them. The runes still hum, the world still sing, and the spirit still remembers the way between. The wind carried the scent of iron and ash across the northern fields. The sky hung low, painted with clouds the color of steel, and the earth trembled beneath the weight of destiny. In that age, battles were not merely clashes of men and weapons, they were meetings of worlds, where flesh and spirit intertwined, and fate itself chose its path. The Vikings believed that no blade struck without meaning, no arrow flew without purpose. For in their hearts, they knew the runes whispered upon the edge of every sword, sang within every shield, and guided the outcome of every war. Through them, victories were carved into legend, and defeats were etched into memory. There were tales told by the skalds, stories that drifted through halls heavy with smoke and song, stories of battles where the runes turned the tide, and others where their power led only to ruin. One such tale spoke of the warlord Einar the Bold, a chieftain whose courage burned brighter than the sun. On the eve of a great battle, he sought the counsel of the seers, for his enemies were many and the omens uncertain. Beneath the flickering torchlight, she cast the runes upon a wolfskin, her voice low and steady. Tiwaz appeared, the rune of victory and justice, glowing faintly like an ember in the dark. Einar's heart swelled with faith. He carved the symbol upon his sword and shield, believing the gods had promised him triumph. When dawn came, his warriors marched to war with the rune shining before them. The clash was fierce, shields splintering, steel singing through the air, but Einar's forces fought with the fire of prophecy in their souls. They believed themselves chosen, their courage unshakable, their arms guided by unseen hands. By sunset, the enemy lay broken, and the field belonged to Einar. Songs were sung of his glory, and the rune of Tiwaz was raised high upon banners, a mark of divine favor. But the seers, wise and silent, knew what Einar did not. The rune of victory also carried the weight of sacrifice. The triumph had been bought with blood. His brother, his closest friend, and half his kin fell that day, their spirits carried into the halls beyond. Victory had come, but its price was steep. When the fires of celebration burned, Einar sat apart, staring into the flames, hearing the faint whispers of the runes reminding him that no gift is given without cost. Another story tells of Astrid the shield maiden, fierce and unyielding, whose heart beat like thunder. She carved Algiz, the rune of protection, into her armor, and Sowilo, the rune of the sun, upon her blade. Her faith was strong, she believed the light would shield her from darkness. When the enemy struck with fury, she stood unbroken, her sword flashing like a shard of the sun itself. For a time, it seemed the runes truly guarded her, arrows veered aside, blades glanced off her shield. Her warriors fought with renewed spirit, inspired by her radiant strength. But as the day wore on, the sky darkened, and a sudden storm swept across the field. Rain poured down, washing the symbols from her armor, blurring the marks upon her sword. In that moment, a hidden spear found its mark, piercing her side. As she fell, she grasped her weapon and whispered the names of the runes one final time. Though her body perished, her spirit burned on, carried into legend. The runes had not failed her, they had fulfilled their truth. For Sowilo, the sun, does not promise endless light. It teaches that every dawn must give way to dusk, and every flame must one day return to the void. There were also darker tales, stories of hubris, of men who sought to bend the runes to their will, not with reverence, but with greed. One such tale spoke of a king who carved Fehu, the rune of wealth, upon his throne and treasures, demanding endless prosperity. He offered no sacrifice, no gratitude, only hunger for more. At first, his coffers overflowed, his ships returned laden with gold. But soon, envy and betrayal crept through his hall. His kin turned against him, his warriors abandoned their oaths, and his kingdom fell to ruin. The runes had given him what he asked for, yet stripped away what he truly needed. For Fehu's lesson is not possession, but flow. Wealth must move like a river, or it will drown its keeper. And still, in the songs of the Skalds, there are moments where the runes seem to weep. In one battle long forgotten by time, two brothers stood on opposite sides of a field, each believing the gods favored his cause. One carved Tiwaz, the other Iwaz, the rune of endurance, of life's eternal cycle. When the fight began, both charged with the cry of destiny on their lips. By day's end, both lay fallen, their blood mingling with the earth, their runes shining faintly beside them. The wind carried their spirits skyward, whispering the truth that fate does not choose sides, it merely unfolds. Yet not all endings were sorrowful. There were moments when the runes brought miracles. A story is told of a healer who wandered the aftermath of war, moving among the wounded with quiet grace. She carried a small stone carved with laguz, the rune of water and flow. She sang softly as she pressed her hands to wounds, her voice like a river's song. Where her song touched, pain eased, and the dying found peace. The warriors who survived swore they saw a faint light ripple across her palms, as though the rune itself had awakened. Her gift was not to win battles, but to heal what they left behind. The Vikings knew that the runes were not weapons of control but companions of destiny. They did not guarantee victory, nor shield all from harm. They were mirrors of truth, reflecting the strength and frailty of those who carved them. To wield their power was to step into the current of fate, to trust that every triumph and every loss carried purpose. When the fighting ceased, and silence returned to the fields, the survivors would kneel among the fallen, tracing the symbols carved upon shields and blades. They would whisper prayers to Odin and to the runes themselves, thanking them for guidance, for courage, for the lessons written in blood and fire. Fires were lit, offerings made, songs sung beneath the pale glow of the moon. And as the smoke rose into the night, the runes shone faintly, their voices blending with the wind, a soft hymn to the eternal dance of victory and defeat. For in the end, the Vikings understood that no battle was ever truly lost or won. Every clash, every breath, was part of the greater design, a thread in the endless weave of Wyrd. The runes did not choose sides, they revealed the truth of all things, that strength lies in courage, wisdom in acceptance, and meaning in every fate. So the stories endured, of kings and shield maidens, of triumphs carved in flame and sorrows written in shadow. Through them, the runes continued to speak, whispering across time that the greatest victory is not in conquest, but in harmony with the path the gods have set. Across the silent landscapes of the north, where moss creeps over stone and wind whispers through forgotten valleys, the remnants of an ancient world still breathe. The Vikings are gone, their longships turned to dust, their voices faded into myth, yet the runes remain. Carved into weathered stones, etched upon fragments of wood, inscribed upon bones buried deep within the earth, they speak softly across the centuries. Their lines are faint but enduring, like the heartbeat of a memory that refuses to fade. Each discovery is a whisper from the past, a message from hands that once shaped destiny beneath the gaze of the gods. Archaeologists walk the northern fields with quiet reverence, brushing aside layers of time to uncover what was left behind. In Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, great stones rise from the earth, standing alone in forests and meadows, their surfaces carved with runes that have watched the seasons turn for 1,000 years. These rune stones are not relics of fantasy, they are voices of real men and women, storytellers who carved their grief, their triumphs, their love, and their faith into the living rock. The marks cut deep by blades now smoothed by centuries of rain still hold meaning, their shapes whispering tales of the souls who made them. Some stones speak of journeys across the sea, of warriors who sailed to distant lands and never returned. One such inscription reads, "Rolf raised this stone in memory of Bjorn, his brother, who died in the east. May the gods guard his spirit." The words are simple, yet they carry the weight of love and loss that transcends time. Others speak of great deeds, of battles fought and honors won. Some offer prayers to Odin, Thor, or Christ, standing at the threshold between old faiths and new, bearing witness to an age of transformation. In the soil, archaeologists have found talismans small enough to fit in a palm, slivers of bone, pieces of amber, chips of wood, each inscribed with runes of power. These were carried close to the heart, bound in leather, kissed before battle, whispered to in moments of fear. When uncovered, they still seem to hum with the faint echo of intention, as though the prayers of their makers linger within their lines. In burial mounds, swords have been unearthed with runes carved along their blades, faded yet legible, invoking victory and courage. Shields bear markings of protection, rings etched with symbols of love and luck. Even combs, tools, and utensils carry these ancient signs, reminders that the runes were not confined to ritual but woven into every part of life. One of the most famous discoveries rests in Sweden, the rock stone, towering and mysterious, its surface covered in hundreds of runes. Scholars have studied it for centuries, debating its meaning. Some say it tells the story of heroic battles, others that it is a riddle, a poem woven with myth and prophecy. Its words blend history with legend, speaking of gods and kings, of the cycles of the sun, of life and death entwined. To stand before it is to feel the breath of the ancients, to sense the awe of a world where symbols carried the power to bind fate itself. Other artifacts lie hidden in museums, their carvings glowing softly beneath gentle lights. Fragments of wood preserved in bogs still bear traces of inked runes, written by hands long turned to dust. On these small pieces, we see glimpses of daily life, messages of trade, charms of love, names of families who once laughed and wept beneath the northern sky. A simple inscription found on a stick in Bergen reads, "I love you, kiss me." Another, carved into a bone, whispers a plea for good fortune. These voices are not of warriors or kings but of ordinary souls, reminding us that the runes belong to all who lived and dreamed in that distant time. Modern scholars, guided by both science and wonder, have pieced together the stories etched into these artifacts. They study the shapes, the grammar, the rhythm of the inscriptions, decoding the intentions behind each line. Yet even as they translate the words, a mystery remains. For the Vikings believed the runes were more than language, they were life itself, each stroke a fragment of cosmic order. And so, though we can read their messages, we can never fully capture the breath of magic that flowed through their making. In quiet halls and open fields, the evidence stands as testimony. The rune stones endure not as monuments of conquest, but as whispers of the human spirit, of love, loss, courage, and faith in forces unseen. They are the bridges between the mortal and the divine, carved by hands that sought to speak to eternity. The marks they left behind outlived their names, their kingdoms, their songs, yet carry the same pulse that once stirred their hearts. When the archaeologist bends close, brushing away the soil, they are not merely uncovering stone, they are touching a moment frozen in time. They feel the groove of a chisel, the depth of a line, the intention pressed into the world by someone who believed that symbols could reach the gods. In that instant, past and present merge, and the silence between centuries is broken by a whisper, "I was here. I lived. I believed." The runes found in burial mounds and temples, in homes and ships, tell a story far greater than war or myth. They speak of a people who saw the universe alive with meaning, who believed that even in death, the soul continued its journey, guided by the marks it carried. They remind us that writing was once an act of faith, a sacred conversation between man and mystery. And though the old world has faded, the runes endure. On windswept hills, moss-covered stones still stand, watching the sky as they have for 1,000 winters. The words upon them may grow faint, but their spirit remains, silent, patient, eternal. For the runes were never meant to be forgotten. They were carved to last, to sing softly through time, to remind those who listen that every mark upon the earth carries a story, and every story is a thread in the endless weave of existence. In the hush of twilight, when the sun sinks behind the fjords and shadows stretch long across the fields, the stones seem to breathe again. The wind moves through the grass like a sigh, and for a moment, if one listens closely, it is possible to hear the echo of those ancient voices, whispering their truths through the language of the runes, messages of love, loss, courage, and the eternal bond between the living and the divine. The world was changing. The old gods, once called upon in whispers beneath the stars, began to fade from the songs of men. Across the northern lands, new voices rose, carrying with them the promise of a different faith, a single God, a new light. Churches of wood and stone grew where sacred groves once stood. The ringing of bells drifted over the fjords, soft and solemn, where once the chants to Odin, Thor, and Freyja had echoed in the night. The age of the runes was drawing to its close, not in fire or sudden silence, but like the slow dimming of a lantern, a gentle twilight settling over a world that had sung for centuries in the language of symbols. The shift came quietly at first. Travelers returned from distant lands, speaking of a God who walked among men, who preached mercy instead of might, forgiveness instead of fate. Kings listened, weighing faith against power, seeing in the cross not only salvation but unity, a way to bind kingdoms beneath a single creed. One by one, they laid aside the old sacrifices and raised the banners of the new. The priests of the Northmen, once keepers of seer and readers of the runes, watched as their temples grew empty, their fires left to die. Yet even as the world turned, the runes remained, silent, patient, carved into stone and memory. In the hearts of many, the transition brought confusion. The Vikings had long lived by the weave of wyrd, trusting in the patterns of fate and the whispers of the old symbols. They believed that the runes carried the voice of the divine, that each mark was a prayer and each word a living thread in the fabric of the cosmos. Now they were told that only one name held power, that the old gods were but shadows, and the symbols they had carved with love and reverence were relics of a heathen past. Some embraced the new faith with open arms, seeking peace in its promise. Others clung to the runes in secret, carving them in hidden places, whispering their names beneath the sound of the church bell. There are stories of old men sitting beside their hearths, tracing runes into the ashes with their fingers, remembering the chants they once sang beneath the open sky. Of women who embroidered small symbols into the hems of garments, quiet blessings stitched where no priest would see. Of warriors who still carved Algiz for protection upon their blades, though they crossed themselves before battle. The two worlds mingled, not with hatred, but with a melancholy grace, as though the soul could not easily let go of the language it had always known. In time, the runes became forbidden in many lands. The church declared them tools of sorcery, relics of a pagan age best left buried. Those caught using them were warned, punished, or cast out. The sacred chants of Galder grew silent, the songs of the seers faded into memory. Where once seer wove the strands of destiny, now prayer arose in Latin hymns. The great stones that bore the marks of the old world stood untouched, their meanings slowly forgotten. Moss crept across their surfaces, and the wind sang over them alone. Yet even as their voices quieted, the runes refused to die. They lingered in the hearts of the people, in lullabies and proverbs, in the quiet reverence for nature that no doctrine could erase. The memory of Odin's sacrifice upon the world tree still flickered in the tales told to children. Though his name was softened, his story reshaped. The Norns, the weavers of fate, became echoes in the prayers for divine will. The symbols, once carved with purpose, now slept beneath layers of time, waiting for the day when someone would trace them again and feel the pulse of their old magic. For the Vikings, the coming of Christianity was both an ending and a beginning. The cross brought with it hope, a promise of eternal life beyond the grave, a mercy unknown in the old world of fate and sacrifice. But it also asked for silence from the songs that had carried their ancestors through ages of snow and storm. The transformation was not violent for all. In many places, the two faiths intertwined like vines upon the same tree. Churches were built beside ancient stones. Crosses were carved beside runes. Inscriptions mixed the names of Christ with the symbols of Odin's wisdom, as if the people could not bear to choose between the old and the new. One such stone still stands in Denmark, carved with both cross and rune, its inscription reading, Gorm raised this stone in memory of Thyra, his beloved wife. May God and the gods guard her soul. In those words lies the truth of the time, a bridge between worlds, a heart divided but still beating with love. It was not rebellion but remembrance, a quiet plea that the old and the new might walk together through the mists of eternity. As the centuries turned, the runes fell into slumber. The art of reading them faded from memory. Scholars of the New Age saw only marks, their meanings lost, their songs forgotten. The voices of the gods grew distant, their names whispered only in secret, in dreams, in the sigh of wind through ancient forests. Yet the stones endured, and the symbols waited. For though faith may change and empires may crumble, the language of the soul cannot be erased. It lingers in the earth, in the rhythm of seasons, in the pulse of the heart that still seeks to understand the mystery of its own being. And so the age of the runes came to its twilight. The fires of the old ways dimmed, their smoke curling into the heavens, carrying with it the last prayers of those who remembered. But twilight is not the end. It is the soft passage between day and night, a breath of stillness where the light does not vanish but transforms. The runes, though silenced by time, did not vanish. They became part of the land, part of the stories, part of the dreams of those who would one day seek them again. Even now, beneath church bells and modern skies, they whisper from the stones, calling softly to those who listen with the heart. Their language is the language of truth, of cycles and balance, of loss and endurance. The old gods may sleep, but their symbols still hum with quiet power, reminding us that every ending is a doorway, and every silence still holds a song. Centuries passed. The fires of the old world dimmed, and the voices that once sang to Odin and Freyja faded into the hush of history. The rune stones stood alone in meadows and forests, their carvings softened by wind and rain. The world changed around them. Villages grew into cities, ships gave way to machines, and new languages rose upon the tongues of men. Yet still, the runes remained, their shapes carved deep into stone, their meanings sleeping like embers beneath the ash of time. Forgotten by many, they waited patiently, knowing the world would one day remember. The longing to seek what was once sacred never truly dies. When scholars began to study the relics of the past, the runes stirred again. Historians brushed dust from ancient stones, tracing the lines with reverent fingers, listening for echoes in their silence. They sought to read the messages left behind by hands that had long returned to the earth. Slowly, the old symbols awakened. Their meanings were studied, their names restored, and their voices began to whisper once more. But it was not only scholars who heard their call. Across the centuries, seekers of meaning felt their pull. In an age of noise, the runes spoke of stillness. In a world of shifting beliefs, they offered timeless truth, that everything is connected, that every soul walks a path woven by unseen threads. Artists painted them, poets wrote of them, dreamers meditated upon their forms. The runes returned not as relics of a lost faith, but as living symbols of wisdom and harmony. In quiet rooms lit by candlelight, seekers once more cast the runes, not to command fate, but to listen to it. They asked not what the future held, but what the spirit needed to know. Fehu became a lesson in generosity, Uruz a reminder of endurance, Algiz a sign of trust. The runes answered softly, reflecting truths already carried within. The old magic had not vanished, it had simply changed shape. Philosophers, too, saw in them the language of the soul. Carl Jung wrote of symbols as living bridges between the conscious and the divine. In the runes, many found that bridge still standing, archetypes of strength, transformation, and light. They became companions for those walking the inward path, reminders that every life moves through cycles of challenge and renewal. The runes also returned in art and story. Their shapes appeared upon jewelry, in books and songs, their presence woven into modern myth. No longer bound to the north, they spoke to all who listened, their message universal, of courage, balance, and destiny. They were not bound by time or place, for they belonged to the human spirit itself. In quiet fields, travelers still seek the old stones, tracing their faded carvings with gentle hands. They stand in silence, feeling the breath of centuries upon the air. Some leave offerings, small tokens or whispered prayers, not to forgotten gods, but to the mystery itself. For in those moments, the veil between past and present grows thin, and the heart remembers. Yet some have misunderstood their power, twisting the runes into symbols of pride or separation. But the runes cannot be owned, they serve only truth. They speak to the humble heart, to those who approach with reverence and peace. Now, as the world turns once more toward meaning, the runes awaken in new ways. They remind us that nothing is ever truly lost. Knowledge may sleep, but it never dies. It waits in stone and memory, in silence and dream. The same spirit that whispered to Odin still hums in the hearts of those who seek. As night falls, when the noise of the world fades, the runes glow quietly in the mind like stars. They whisper, trust the path, honor the balance, walk with courage. For the language of the soul is eternal, and the symbols of wisdom never truly fade. Through the long journey of ages, through battles and prayers, silence and rediscovery, the runes have spoken one truth again and again, that life is a tapestry woven from both light and shadow, from choice and destiny, from the breath of the gods and the courage of the soul. They are not only symbols carved into stone, but mirrors held up to the heart, reflecting what it already knows, that to live is to walk hand in hand with fate, to meet every trial with strength, and to honor every moment as sacred. The Vikings who carved these marks upon wood and bone understood what many still seek to learn, that existence is not meant to be conquered, but embraced. They lived by the rhythm of the earth, by the turn of the seasons, by the whisper of wind and wave. To them, courage was not the absence of fear, but the quiet resolve to face it. The runes taught them that each life is a thread in the endless weave of the cosmos, no less important than the stars above or the soil beneath their feet. From Tiwaz, they learned the meaning of sacrifice, that victory demands offering, that honor is the truest shield. From Algiz, they drew the strength to stand firm, trusting in unseen guardians who walk beside the brave. Tiwaz reminded them that endings are not final, that the yew tree's roots reach both into life and death, binding them as one. And so Wilo, the sun, whispered that even through the darkest winter, light always returns. The runes spoke of balance. They taught that fortune is fleeting, that joy and sorrow dance together like fire and smoke. Fehu taught generosity, that true wealth is not what is hoarded, but what is shared. Northes spoke of hardship, of the forge that shapes the spirit, reminding all who struggle that pressure births strength, and that patience is its own form of wisdom. Wonjo sang of joy, not as the fleeting laughter of victory, but as the deep peace found in gratitude, in love, in the quiet moments where the heart rests and knows it is enough. These symbols, though ancient, still speak in voices as soft as the sea and as steady as the mountains. They whisper that courage is not born from certainty, but from trust, from the knowing that whatever path unfolds, it is part of the great design. They remind us that we are all wanderers in a vast mystery, guided not by answers, but by faith, by intuition, by the quiet call of something eternal within. The runes teach humility, that even the gods bow before fate, and that wisdom lies in walking gently through the world, honoring both its beauty and its storms. They tell us that every moment, every breath, is a carving upon the tablet of time, each choice shaping the song our lives will sing long after we are gone. To live with awareness is to carve with care, to let our words, our deeds, our kindness be the runes we leave behind. In their silence, the runes carry a message of hope. They say that nothing is ever truly lost, that every ending is a turning, every darkness a passage toward dawn. They urge us to listen, to the earth beneath our feet, to the winds that move unseen, to the voice within that still remembers. For the same spirit that whispered to Odin upon the world tree whispers still to every soul that dares to seek. To sit with the runes is to sit with the truth of being human, that we are fragile and fierce, finite and eternal, shaped by love, loss, and longing. They invite us to walk our path with grace, to face what comes with open eyes and a steady heart. They teach us that the measure of a life is not found in conquest, but in meaning, in the courage to love, to forgive, to stand, and to surrender. Even now, in the quiet hours when the world slows and sleep draws near, the runes speak softly to those who listen. They tell us that destiny is not a chain, but a song, that we are both the singers and the melody, that within every challenge lies a lesson, and within every silence, a promise. They remind us that the soul is a wanderer of many worlds, learning through each, growing through time, carried always by the unseen hands of fate. So let their wisdom settle gently in your heart. Let the symbols glow behind your eyes like embers, each one a light along the path. Trust in the weave of the world, in the quiet harmony that binds all things. You are part of the great story, a note in the eternal song. And as the runes have always whispered, walk with courage, live with purpose, and carve your truth into the fabric of eternity. Now the journey draws to its close. The fires of memory burn low, their glow soft and steady, casting long shadows across the ancient path. You have walked through the world of the Vikings, through their faith and their fate, through the whisper of runes that sang across the ages. The wind grows quiet now, the sea rests still, and the night opens its arms. It is time to set down the sword, to silence the chant, to breathe deeply and drift into the embrace of sleep, where dreams carry the wisdom of all that has been learned. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of the day fade, the thoughts of the waking world dissolving like mist upon the morning tide. You are safe here, in the silence of eternity. Around you, the air hums with gentle power, the same ancient pulse that moved through the hands of those who carved the runes beneath northern skies. Their whispers reach you still, soft as the sigh of the wind through pine, tender as the hush before dawn. They speak not in words, but in feelings, calm, courage, peace. See them now, the symbols glowing faintly in the darkness of your mind. Each one a light, a small flame burning steady against the endless sky. Fehu appears first, warm and golden, a rune of flow and abundance. It moves like a river, carrying all that you need, reminding you that life is generous, that giving and receiving are one. Let its warmth settle in your chest, filling you with gratitude. Next comes Uruz, strong and steady, the deep power of the earth beneath your feet. It hums with endurance, with quiet strength. Feel it rise through you, through your bones, anchoring you in the present, reminding you that you are unbreakable, rooted like the ancient trees. You are part of the living world, and its strength is yours. Algiz follows, a shape like antlers reaching toward the heavens. It is the rune of protection, of sacred guardianship. It stands beside you now, forming a gentle shield around your spirit. Within its embrace, nothing can harm you. The night holds only peace. Breathe deeply, and know you are safe. Now so Willow shines, bright as the sun on still waters, its light warm and golden. It is the spark of joy, the promise of dawn, the eternal flame that never fades. Let its glow wash over you, melting the last shadows of worry, guiding you into the soft radiance of rest. You are light, and light is eternal. Around these symbols, the others gather, forming a circle that glows like stars across a midnight sky. Tiwaz, for courage and honor. Iwaz, for transformation and balance. Wonjo, the rune of joy and peace. Together they hum a lullaby older than time, a song of unity, of harmony, of the soul's quiet journey through the weave of destiny. You stand within their circle, surrounded by their calm. The air is cool and gentle, carrying the scent of pine and sea. Above you, the northern lights shimmer, slow and graceful, ribbons of green and gold dancing across the sky. They are the breath of the gods, the glow of creation, the silent voice of the cosmos speaking in color and light. Their beauty fills you with wonder, reminding you that you, too, are part of this vast and perfect design. Beneath your feet, the earth hums. It knows your name, it feels your heart, and it cradles you as you rest. The stars watch from above, patient and kind. Between them, the runes float like constellations, each one a promise, that you are guided, that you are loved, that your path unfolds exactly as it should. Let your breath slow. Inhale gently through the nose, feeling the air cool and soft. Exhale through the mouth, releasing all that you no longer need, worry, weight, and weariness. With every breath, you sink deeper into peace. Your body grows light, your thoughts grow still, your spirit drifts like a leaf upon a quiet stream. You are not alone. The wisdom of the runes travels with you, their voices soft as a lullaby. They whisper, trust, rest, become. They remind you that you are part of the great story, your thread woven through the fabric of time, shining bright in the tapestry of existence. There is no hurry. There is no fear. only the endless unfolding of life's gentle rhythm, guided by love, shaped by destiny. As sleep draws near, the circle of runes fades into a soft glow, their light blending with the stars, with your breath, with your dreams. The night is wide and welcoming, filled with the promise of renewal. You drift upon its current, floating toward the horizon of dreams, where ancient wisdom waits in silence. Rest now. The journey is complete. The symbols watch over you, their power woven into your heart. You carry their lessons: courage, balance, trust, and peace. Let them cradle you through the night, guiding your dreams through the forests of memory, across the seas of time, beneath the quiet gaze of the eternal. Breathe once more, deeply and slow. The world fades, the mind grows still, and in the gentle darkness, the runes whisper their final blessing. You are part of the great song. You are safe. You are loved. Sleep now, child of the North, beneath the watchful eyes of stars and symbols, wrapped in the silence of the infinite.